Welcome back to the GCSE Maths Pro YouTube channel. This video for today is going to be everything about expanding brackets. So that is expanding single brackets, then double brackets, and finally triple brackets. Now, just a note that the triple brackets part is for higher tier only. If you're doing foundation tier, you can just check out the first two parts of this video. When it gets to triple brackets, just click off of it. You can ignore that part, okay? The first question is expand 3 and then in brackets x plus 2. Now, first of all, what do the brackets mean? What does expanding mean? Basically, that just means multiply. Okay, so we're going to be multiplying 3 times by everything inside the brackets. The way that I like to do it is by just drawing lines so that I don't miss anything when I'm expanding. I need to multiply 3 by the two terms that are in the bracket individually. So I'm literally just going to do 3 times x, which is obviously 3x. Then I'm going to do 3 times 2. And also we have to really pay attention to if there's any positives, negatives, and what's going on with that. Luckily here we've got positive 3 and positive 2. So it's going to be plus 6. That is literally it. We're just multiplying whatever's on the outside by whatever is on the inside. I can't simplify this any further because these two terms are not like terms. This one's 3x and this is just 6 on its own. They can't be combined any further. Okay, our next one is very similar, but we're now including some negatives as well, so really pay attention to that. We've got not just 4x, but minus 4x times by x squared minus 20. So first of all, minus 4x times by positive x squared. Okay, well let's just deal with the positive and the negative. Positive times a negative is a negative overall. Then we've got the whole number, so 4 times, technically there's a 1 here, isn't there? 4 times 1 is just 4, and then we'll look at the x's. Again, this is technically x to the power of 1, so x times x squared, same as we had before, is going to be x cubed. So just work through them piece by piece. The symbols, then the whole numbers, then the letters. Then we've got minus 4x times by minus 20. Now in this case they're both negatives, and when you multiply two negatives together they cancel out and they make a positive. So actually I'm going to put plus, and then 4 times 20 is 80x. Our next one, we have a few different letters involved. So you can see we've got expand 7xy times by y squared minus 3x. So again, just work through it piece by piece. So the first thing we've got, they're both positive, so that's good. We know that the answer for this bit's going to be positive. 7 times, technically there's a 1 here, isn't there, in front of the y squared, so 7 times 1 is just 7. X, now we don't have another x to multiply it by, so that just stays the same. And then we've got y, which again is to the power of 1, times y squared, which will give us y cubed. Then we can move on to the second bit, which is 7xy times by minus 3x. So first of all, positive times a negative is a negative. The whole numbers, 7 times 3 is 21. Then we've got x times x. Again, they're both x to the power of 1. So x times x is going to be x squared. And there's just a y there. There's not really anything to multiply it by, so that just stays there. We're going to jump right into the first question, which says expand and simplify x plus 2 and then x plus 7. If you've seen the first video, or you're already quite happy with the concept of expanding, it basically just means multiply. So we have this imaginary multiply symbol in between the two brackets, and we need to multiply each term in the first bracket by each term in the second bracket. There's two parts to this question, as you can see. Part 1 is the expand, which as we said is multiply, and the second part is simplify. Okay, so we're going to have one line of working for expanding, for multiplying, and the second line of working will be then to simplify what we've got. So our first line, I'm going to start off by using the method where I just draw lines between each of the terms, and I can make sure that I've got the right number of lines and I've multiplied the right number of terms, okay? That's the method I like to use because I think it's a bit faster. So we have to multiply the first term by both terms in the second bracket, okay? So the first term in the first bracket is x. I'm going to times it by then the first term in the second bracket, which obviously is also x. X times x, well, they're both positive, so we've got positive x squared. Then I move on and go, okay, let me get the same x from the first bracket and multiply it by the second term in the second bracket, which is not just 7, but positive 7, isn't it? We always have to take the symbol that's in front of the letter or the number, in this case, plus. So I've got positive x times positive 7, so it's going to be plus and then obviously x times 7 is 7x. Now that I've multiplied the first term in the first bracket, so the x, by both terms in the second bracket, I can then move on to the second term in the first bracket, okay, which is this 2. Again, remember, it's not just 2, it is positive 2. So I'm going to do 2 times x, they're both positive, so I've got plus 2x. Then I'm going to do the second term by the second term in the second bracket, 2 times 7, again, both positive, plus 14. Now, if you like to use this method and you do it in this specific order, you should end up with something that looks a bit like a piranha, okay? So you know you've done it in the correct order. If you've got this kind of piranha shape, there should be 4 lines, as you can see, and 4 multiplications that you've done. That is the expand part. So this bit is expand. So we've done that now, we can tick that off. Now we need to simplify. Simplifying with algebra pretty much refers back to collecting like terms, which a lot of people don't really remember what we mean by that. They've kind of heard of it, but they don't really remember what that actually means. So like terms are things like, are they both x's? Are they both x squareds? Are they just whole numbers? You know, what can we combine? What can we not combine? In this case, you can see the only like terms we have are these middle two. We've got a 7x and a 2x. Those are like terms. So in this case, I can actually add them together. So my simplifying line is going to be still x squared because there aren't any other x squareds to change that. But then I've got 7x plus 2x, which is plus 9x. And finally, I've still got the plus 14 because, again, that's a whole number on its own. I don't have any other whole numbers on their own. I don't have any other like terms for the 14. So once we've simplified it, most of the time, not saying all the time, but most of the time, you're going to end up with 3 terms, okay? So you started off with 4 terms here, and now we've got 3. So that is your answer. Expand and simplify, we've got x squared plus 9x plus 14. Because we multiplied 2 of these x's together, we've ended up with a quadratic. This is a quadratic, isn't it? So you should end up with something that looks a little bit like ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? I know it says plus, it could also obviously be minus, but this is the standard format of a quadratic. And obviously a, b, and c will be numbers depending on the question. Okay, so we're just repeating ourselves again. However, you can see this one's a little bit different because we've got a negative in front of the x, but our process will still be the same. So expand and simplify, minus x plus 4 multiplied by x minus 15. So I'm going to do the first 2 terms multiplied together. So I've got minus x times positive x, which we know will be a minus x squared, okay, minus x squared. Then I've got minus x times minus 15. So 2 negatives make a positive, and then x and 15 would make 15x. Then I'm going to move down and look at the second term of the first bracket, which is 4. This one's positive. So positive 4 times x is positive 4x. And finally, positive 4 times negative 15. Positive and a negative makes a negative, and 4 times 15 will make 60. So we've expanded. Now we can simplify. So step 2, simplify. Again, as I said before, if you do it in this order, you should just find that the 2 like terms, or the 2 x terms, will be in the middle anyway. You can just add them together in this case. Minus x squared stays the same. 15x plus 4x is 19x. And the minus 60 is at the end. Okay, so now we have simplified as well. Okay, so keep pausing the video, trying out these different questions and see how it goes. So 5x times 3x, well, they're both positive. Then I'm going to do 5 times 3, which is 15, and x times x, which is x squared. Then 5x times 4, again, they're both positive, so plus 4 times 5 is 20, and the x is still there. Then we have minus 9 times 3x, so that will be a negative 27x. And lastly, minus 9 times positive 4, which will be minus 36. Okay, so we've expanded. Now we're going to simplify. Just those 2 terms in the middle, both x terms can simplify. So 15x squared. And 20x minus 27x will give me minus 7x overall, minus 36 at the end. Okay, so the second part of this topic for expanding brackets is we're going to do it in the exact same way, but I just want to really highlight a specific type of quadratic. So we've got here difference of 2 squares. Okay, and I'm going to show you what that means once we've expanded these brackets. So we're still going to do it in the exact same way. Expand and simplify x plus 4 times x minus 4. So exactly the same. Expand. X times x is x squared. X times minus 4 is minus 4x. And then 4 times x is going to be plus 4x. And finally, 4 times minus 4, so positive times a negative is a negative, 16. I simplify in the exact same way. I've still got my x squared, but I know that these two in the middle I'm going to add together. However, can you see that I've got minus 4x plus 4x? Well, that should cancel out. That's going to give me 0, isn't it? Okay, so those cancel out. You don't even have an x in this case. And then we still have minus 16. So actually, while I said obviously most of the time you're going to get a quadratic that looks like ax squared plus bx plus c, you might end up with a scenario where you just have ax squared minus c. In this case, it's minus. That's absolutely fine. Still quadratic. You've still expanded it specifically, but it's just called difference of two squares. And what we mean by that is, well, x squared, that's a square number, isn't it? Clearly, that's x times x. And then we've got 16. Well, we know that's a square number because we literally just did 4 times 4. And finally, difference means when you subtract, isn't it? If they say find the difference between these two numbers, you would subtract them. So the difference of two squares is this format here. Now, this will just relate to factorising and actually it even relates to surds. It relates to a lot of other topics. It's just more so at this point that I want you to be able to recognise this format. Do you see how the brackets were identical except one was plus, one was minus? So if you have two sets of brackets where they are basically the exact same thing except one is a plus, one's a minus, it will create this difference of two squares situation. Okay, so don't get worried if the middle bit cancels out. That can happen sometimes. We're going to jump right in and have a look at our first question with expand and simplify x plus 3 times x plus 8 times x plus 5. You do need to make sure that you understand, first of all, the concept of what expanding is, but also how to expand double brackets before doing this video and these questions, because basically we're going to be doing expanding double brackets and then we're going to be bringing in the final bracket, okay? So if you're not too sure about that, definitely go back and check out that video first. So the way that we're going to expand and simplify triple brackets is we're going to just focus on the first two brackets first and expand them as if they are double brackets, and then we're going to bring that final bracket in at the end and expand that afterwards, okay? So it's kind of like expanding two sets of double brackets, basically. So we're going to expand with the same method as I do with expanding double brackets. We're going to do x times x, which obviously gives us x squared. Then we've got x times 8, which is positive 8x. Then we'll move on to this 3 here. So 3 times x, which is positive 3x. And finally, 3 times 8, again, both positive, so plus 24. So I've expanded that. Expand is always step 1, isn't it? Expand that. Now, before I deal with this final bracket, I'm going to go simplify this because, as you know, we should end up with these two terms in the middle that we can simplify. So I'm going to do x squared, obviously 8x plus 3x is 11x, and plus 24. So now it's a little bit smaller, we've only got 3 terms to deal with. Then what you're going to do is bring in this final bracket again. So I'm going to draw brackets around this and bring this back here. Now this is exactly the same as expanding double brackets again because, as you can see, we've only got 2 brackets. However, you can see the first bracket has 3 terms in it. So it can get a little bit complicated. Okay, a lot of people do it in different ways, but if you just follow it in the same order that I do it, you should see that in the end everything will simplify really well again. So technically we're going back to step 1 and we're expanding again. I'm just going to use the exact same method. So I'm going to start off with this x squared and multiply it by both terms in the second bracket. So I'm going to do x squared times x, which gives me x cubed. Then x squared times 5, which gives me plus 5x squared. Then I'm going to move on to the middle one, which is 11x, and times that by both terms in the second bracket. What I'm going to do is change the colour just so that you can see very clearly, at least in this first example, because they are going to overlap each other in this case. I'm just going to use pink. So I'm going to do 11x times by that first x in the second bracket. So I've got 11x squared, then 11x times by the 5, which is 55x. And then finally, I've got this term here, the 24, so I can do that underneath. Now let's just change the colour again. So 24 times x is plus 24x, and finally 24 times 5, which gives me plus 120. So you can see here, even though I've expanded double brackets technically, because there were 3 terms in the first one, I've actually ended up with having to multiply 6 things, and I should have 6 terms. Now again, if you follow this exact same order, you can see that when we come to then simplify again, it's very straightforward because everything in terms of like terms, so we mentioned like terms in our expanding double brackets video, like terms is how we simplify, isn't it? We're looking for terms that are the same in terms of, do we have x cubed in multiple places that we can put together? Do we have x squareds, x's, so on, just whole numbers on their own that we can put together? In this case, you can see we don't have any other x cubed, so that will just stay as it is. However, we do have 5x squared plus 11x squared. Those are like terms, so I can add those together. So I get plus 16x squared. Then again, if you move on to the next thing, you can see we've got some more like terms. We've got 55x and 24x. They're both something x. So I can add those together. Okay, so I get plus 79x. And finally, you can see the 120 on the end is just on its own, so that doesn't have any other like terms to simplify. So when you have triple brackets, you're going to end up with what we call a cubic expression. This is cubic because it's, well, obviously x cubed. You're going to end up with 4 terms. Whereas before with quadratics, we end up with 4 terms that simplify down to 3 terms. With triple brackets, we end up with 6 terms that should simplify down to 4. ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d, effectively, isn't it? Those 4 terms. Okay, so we're going to expand and simplify the first 2 brackets as normal. Then expand and simplify the 3rd bracket. Okay, our next question is exactly the same again, so pause the video, try it out, and then come back when you have your answer. So we're expanding the first 2 brackets first. So we've got 8x times 4x, which is 32x squared. Then we've got 8x times minus 1, so we've got minus 8x. Then we have here, we've got minus 2 times 4x, which is minus 8x as well. And finally, minus 2 times minus 1 is positive 2. We then want to simplify the quadratic, so we've got 32x squared. 8x minus 8x is minus 16x and plus 2. That's your first bit. You want to then copy that into brackets so you can expand it with the final bracket that we're missing. So we've got 2x plus 4 as our other bracket. And expand and simplify again. So 32x squared times 2x gives us 64x cubed. 32x times 4 gives us 128x squared. Get a different colour. Minus 16x times 2x is minus 32x squared. Minus 16x times 4 is minus 64x. And change your colour again for the last 2. So we've got 2 times 2x plus 4x, and lastly 2 times 4, so plus 8. Now we want to simplify by collecting the like terms. We've got 64x cubed as itself. We've then got the x squareds that we can add together. So 128x squared, take away 32x squared, which gives us 96x squared. Then we've got the 2 x's, so minus 64x plus 4x, so minus 60x overall, and the 8 is still at the end. That's your final answer, 64x cubed plus 96x squared minus 60x plus 8. Our last question is a little bit different, and it's not necessarily triple brackets, but I did want to just throw it in here because I think it does come up sometimes, and sometimes students aren't really sure how to deal with it. So we are still going to deal with this in a very similar way. We're going to do it into 2 parts. So we have expand and simplify 2x times by x plus 3 times by 4x minus 14. So you can see that the 2x isn't a bracket on its own, but we're still going to kind of treat it as that. What I'm going to do is expand the first 2 parts, I say parts because that's obviously not a bracket in itself, together. So that's effectively expanding single brackets. Then I'm going to expand it as double brackets. Now, you can actually expand these two double brackets first and then times everything by 2x if you want. But the point that I want to make here is, what happens is a lot of students think they need to times both of these brackets by the 2x and then times those two brackets together, which is not the case, okay? So we're not going to do this, that, and then this, and then that, and then times that together, because you'll have times it by 2x twice. Just stick with it in the same kind of way that we were doing the other questions. I'm going to look at the first two parts first, so it's a little bit faster, obviously. 2x times x is going to be 2x squared, and then 2x times 3. It's obviously going to be plus 6x. In that case, there's nothing to simplify, right? So you're just expanding because it's only single brackets. Then we can take that, put it into its own bracket, and expand it with the final third part. So now we've got 2x squared plus 6x times 4x minus 14. Okay, so expand, and then we will need to simplify this part. So 2x squared times 4x will give us 8x cubed. So we're still getting a cubic one here. And then we've got 2x times minus 14. So you've got minus 28x squared. And we've got 6x times 4x. So we've got plus 24x squared. And lastly, 6x times minus 14, which gives us minus 84x. Okay, so we don't have this last term at the end. However, that's obviously because we didn't have as many terms to begin with in the first place. So we are going to be missing some in comparison to the previous examples. We do need to then simplify, just check if there is anything you can simplify, any like terms. So we have 8x cubed, nothing to simplify there as normal. However, you can see we've got two lots of x squared, so we can simplify this bit here. Minus 28x squared plus 24x squared is going to be minus 4x squared overall, and then minus 84x at the end. It's not technically three brackets, it's not technically triple brackets. However, I just wanted to show you that. We'll do it in red so you can see. So don't do, oh, I'm just going to do... Let me just rewrite it so you can see exactly what I mean by that. You know, don't expand it like this. Oh, okay, that's 2x squared and that's plus 6x. And then, oh, let me do that. So that's one bracket. And then let me do this bracket, which is then 8x squared. And then minus 28x. And then expand these together. Because you can see, even from the first bit, we're going to get 16. It's not the same thing, okay? You've only got 3 x's multiplied together. You should end up with x cubed as your highest power. Okay, so if you've got something on the outside, and I don't just mean if it's got an x, it might just be that there was just maybe 2 there, whatever it is, if you have double brackets plus something on the outside, just multiply that something on the outside by the first bracket, then expand those next 2 brackets together, okay? Don't do that. So that is everything on expanding brackets. That was our final video for triple brackets, which, as I mentioned at the start of the video, is for higher tier only, okay? So if you are foundation and you've got it this far, that's great, but you won't technically need this in your exam. Thanks for watching the video. Leave a comment down below, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.